Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Nintendo might just have one more big game to announce to come out in this year of 2026. And I've been thinking about this for a little bit, and you may have heard me talk about some of these things maybe in a live stream a few days ago, but I've been thinking even more about this, and there are some other things that have come up, and there are some other considerations that definitely have me thinking that maybe Nintendo could do something even big here, not like just a simple thing, but perhaps something big, something along the lines of what we've seen with Splatoon Raiders, or Star Fox, or Switch Sports, or a Fire Emblem. Something along those lines. In other words, just another Nintendo IP, another title we could be excited about that could be sneaking its way into 2026. What might that be? Why does this make sense? Well, that's what we're diving into today. Before diving into it all, a quick reminder here that we're getting oh so close to my goal of 60,000 subscribers. I'm hoping to get there soon, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos and you haven't subscribed already, I would definitely appreciate your subscription. So what I want to talk about here is just thinking about what we know about the rest of Nintendo's 2026. So Splatoon Raiders is coming out later this month, great. But after that, we have the months of August, September, October, November, and December. There are 5 months left in the year after July, right? And what's interesting about this is that what we know in terms of what's coming out from Nintendo is not that much. Like, there are some key titles we know about that are coming for 2026. We have Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave coming out September 17th, and we have Nintendo Switch Sports Resort coming out October 22nd. We also know that The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time will be coming out at some point this year, and also the Dust Bloods, which Nintendo does have a hand in publishing here, so that's basically, yes, another Nintendo title, that is also still slated for 2026. So assuming there are no delays, we have 4 major titles that are coming out later this year. And they're quality titles, 4 games that come out in the next 5 months. And some of you might think, that seems like a solid lineup, but what's interesting about it to me is that when you consider prior years, this is looking a little light. So considering last year, in August, we had Dragon Drive. In October, we had Super Mario Galaxy 1+2. You want to count that as one game? Sure, but that happened. And then later in October, we also got Pokemon Legends ZA. And then in November, we got Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and then Kirby Air Riders, and then Metroid Prime 4. If we count Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 as one game, even though technically they're also separate releases, that is 6 games that came out in this 5-month span. In comparison to this year, we have 4. But okay, maybe you want to argue that the games this year are a little bit more significant overall. Like, sure, I think we all agree the game that's probably going to sell the least out of those 4 would be Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and that's still a much bigger game than something like Dragon Drive, for example. But let's look at Nintendo's 2024, which was a down year, a slow year, an in-between year as Nintendo's transitioning from Switch 1 to Switch 2. It was basically one of Nintendo's weakest years in a very long time. And yet, even with this in mind, in the last 5 months of the year, we got Emil the Smiling Man, Famicom Detective Club, that's one game. In September, we got The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. In October, we got Super Mario Party Jamboree. In November, we got Mario and Luigi Brothership. And in December, we got Fitness Boxing 3, Your Personal Trainer. There are some other third-party things that Nintendo published in some regions. I'm not counting those. But even in 2024, a slow year, not counting those random other titles they were publishing, just the Nintendo games, they were at least averaging 1 game per month, which is more than 2026, which is a more important, bigger year because it's the second holiday of Switch 2. How about 2023 though? 2023 was maybe the last big year for Switch 1. How did that look? We had F-Zero 99, Detective Pikachu Returns, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, WarioWare Move It, Super Mario RPG. And there were other little things like updates to other games, including like the Mario Kart Booster Course Pass and such. But the main point here is just talking about Nintendo games. That's 5. And so over the last 3 years, Nintendo's had at least 5 titles that come out between the months of August and December. Right now we're looking at things and, well, we only have 4. It's a little light from a quantity perspective. But there's something else to consider here. Nintendo and From Software have been very quiet about the Dust Bloods. I'm not saying it is going to get delayed, but it might get delayed. In the Nintendo Direct, they didn't provide any reassurance that it was going to be coming out in 2026. They just talked about how they have a network test planned for this summer. Very small, very quick little teaser. We barely got any new footage there. Now, we are getting a network test at some point this summer. We're going to have an opportunity to actually play the game this summer. So from that perspective, it bodes well that the game might be ready for this year. But if I'm just being honest with you, I do have some concerns here. I'm a little worried the game might slip into early 2027. And so if that happens, considering how quiet they've been about this game and how they barely told us anything after so much time, if that happens, we then only have 3 titles from Nintendo coming out in this year of 2026 between the months of August and December, and then things are going to look really weird. But even assuming the Dust Bloods does still come out this year, which, you know, technically according to the different investors briefings we've seen from all companies involved, the plan is for the game to come out this year still. Great, but looking at prior years, things are a little light. And then I consider something else. Nintendo has actually lately been doing this thing where they don't just announce significant releases in Nintendo Directs, they've been giving us some surprise announcements. We go back to 2024, we saw Emil the Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club, and the marketing for that was very interesting. They started off with a very cryptic, creepy tease, and then they gave us a series of demos to play. Definitely unconventional, and it was actually announced not that long after the Nintendo Direct that summer. The game was announced in July, the big Nintendo Direct of that year was in June. And so here we are, in July, supposing that maybe there could be another surprise announcement, maybe Nintendo could pull off another Emil the Smiling Man, possibly. Or we look at last year, Nintendo just announced Splatoon Raiders. Just 5 days after the release of the Nintendo Switch 2. They had their giant Switch 2 Direct in April, where they could have announced Splatoon Raiders, but they just decided to randomly announce this game on Nintendo Today. And then you look at this year, earlier this year, we had a certain perspective of what the lineup would look like going into the summer, but Nintendo had a surprise. Now, we did have an idea of it based off the Mario Galaxy movie and leaks that came out afterwards, but yeah, we got Star Fox announced early May, in that first week of May, with a super quick turnaround to come out just 6 or 7 weeks later in June. A very, very short turnaround for what I think is a fairly substantial release. And so I look at these situations and I think, maybe Nintendo could do this again. Nintendo has certainly been highly experimental with how they go about marketing their games and such. Their Nintendo Direct patterns have been mostly unpredictable as of late, and they've been doing all kinds of different types of Nintendo Directs for all their different game series, or many of them at least. So Nintendo's been very experimental during this Switch 2 era, and even in the approach to the Switch 2 era. I don't think we should rule out the possibility that Nintendo might have another surprise announcement for actually a fairly significant release to come out this year. That way, they are actually matching the typical quantities of published titles in terms of their major Nintendo IP releases like the last few years. But what could that be? Well, we'll get into it in a moment here, but first, here's a brief message. I'm not really a jewelry or bling kind of guy, but I do like to look good, and I am a big fan of so many different games. So when King Ice, the sponsor for today's video, sent over these awesome necklaces, I had to take a look. As you see here with Sonic the Hedgehog and friends, there are hundreds of hand-set, brilliant cut stones. The level of detail here is just incredible, and it's beautiful. From all different angles, it's completely iced out. And all the gold, it's real 14K gold plating. And these are all officially licensed by Sega. There's even this nice Sega stamp on the back, so you know it's official. And then you have these custom boxes that they come in, with the Sonic logo in gold colored foil. There's a really nice premium and refined look to these boxes. These are collector's items with great attention to detail that's true to the character's look and feel, and they're only available at kingice.com. But King Ice is responsible for so many other different designs and collaborations. As you see here, I'm scrolling through, there are so many different companies involved. Yu-Gi-Oh!, Persona, and so much more. So make sure to check it all out with the link in the description below using my promo code, ColdestRestart. So, in regards to what this could be, there's plenty of room to fit it in. We don't have any game announced for August. We're not getting Fire Emblem until September 17th, so we're going to have a significant gap of time where there is no game to talk about. I wonder if Nintendo's going to be making some special announcements during this period of time. Maybe during this period of time, we learn about the Ocarina of Time remake. Maybe that's when we get the network test for the Dustbloods. It's supposed to happen this summer, so you would think would happen before the end of the summer. And maybe there's something else. But then I also do think about, when is the Ocarina of Time remake coming out? Because we just have one major title for September and one major title for October. They could fit in more. We've seen in various holidays from Nintendo where they put out actually a handful of releases in a short window of time. So far, for the October, November, December months, we just have one release date, and that's Switch Sports Resort. Ocarina of Time remake, I am so sure is going to fit into this window of time. I think it's probably going to be November. But then I also got to ask myself, where are they going to slot in the Dustbloods? Maybe that's going to fit into October as well. That does seem like kind of a Halloween fitting game. Perhaps that comes out a week after Switch Sports Resort, right before Halloween. That does make a lot of sense. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if that slides into December, especially considering that we're not even entirely sure if it's going to make it out this year. They may need as much time as possible to make sure it's ready. And some people might think December is a bad time to release the game, but we've seen Nintendo put out some substantial titles in December before. Most recently, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which I'm sure some people will say, well, the game didn't sell that well, but I think that has to do with other factors, and that's not the only example. They've put a lot of casual focus games, like the Fitness Boxing series in December, but then they've also put out other core titles such as Super Smash Bros. Ultimate in December. Best-selling fighting game of all time, by the way, so December didn't hold back Smash Bros. From being successful sales-wise. And then also Xenoblade Chronicles 2 also came out December. It's the best-selling Xenoblade game in the series. So I think the notion that a game coming out in December is not good for sales, at least in terms of Nintendo releases, I would say, well, evidence points to the contrary, actually. Anyway, considering all that, I think there's room for at least one more Nintendo announcement, perhaps more. Now, we could consider Switch 2 editions, and that could help fill in the gaps. I haven't mentioned the Xenoblade Chronicles 1 through 3 Switch 2 editions that are coming out throughout the year. Maybe you want to factor that into this equation. You could. But that also brings me to a rumor that's been rumored from more than one place, many of which are considered credible, or at least all have a history of correctly leaking a variety of Nintendo things in the past. So we have Nate the Hate, who's talked about this, has gotten many things about right Nintendo in the past. Not everything, right, but many things. Most people treat Nate the Hate as one of the most reputable leakers there are. There is Nash Weedle, where there's more debate on, but even him has leaked many things from Nintendo, usually well in advance, actually. I've brought it up, but he technically teased both Ocarina of Time and Star Fox before anyone else. And he actually teased a Pikmin 4 Switch 2 edition before anyone else. And yeah, it's not even just them. We also have Nintendo, who also teased a Zelda remake this year, and we're getting a Zelda remake this year, who also teased multiple Xenoblade announcements this year, and we've gotten a slew of them. Xenoblade Chronicles X, 1, 2, and 3 Switch 2 editions, and Xenoblade Genesis getting announced. So Nintendo has been pretty spot on with his teases, and back in May, Nintendo teased something else, which I think is quite obviously Pikmin. Some people speculated that it was Deltarune. He confirmed it's not about Deltarune, so there you go. He did not deconfirm that it wasn't about Pikmin, so I just think when you see a blue flower, a yellow flower, a red flower soon for summer, considering we've also had the rumors of a Pikmin 4 Switch 2 edition, things are aligning here. I don't think this emojis could really be confused for anything else but Pikmin. That's what I think the tease is for. So maybe that's like the other thing that Nintendo's going to have, just another Switch 2 edition Pikmin 4. And I know some people may not be that excited about that because it's just another Switch 2 edition that's not necessarily that big of a deal, but I would reserve judgment until we see what this is, because there could be some substantial new content in there, and they could be enhancing the visuals, the frame rate, adding a mouse control mode, and obviously if you've already played Pikmin 4, if you already have Pikmin 4, you could get the Switch 2 edition at a discount, so it would just be some nice DLC for people who already have Pikmin 4, and for those who haven't, it could be just another exciting game to play this year on Switch 2. That is a possibility, but there's also other things going on here. Technically, we don't know exactly what Nintendo is teasing. He could be teasing something that's more than just a Switch 2 edition of Pikmin 4. Maybe it's a Pikmin spin-off. Maybe it's something like Splatoon Raiders. Technically, has leaked or attempted to leak a Pikmin spin-off being in the works. Where is that? if that's real, if that's based on real information and is going to see the light of day, what if that's what's going on here, and there could be perhaps a little bit of conflation going on when people have been talking about this Switch 2 edition. Like, for example, Nate the Hate was first suggesting that there would be like a definitive edition for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 this year, and there is an enhanced version of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with new content. But that is a Switch 2 edition, not a definitive edition, which is what I felt made sense early in the year when we heard about this. And so my thinking here isn't so much that Nate the Hate was wrong, but maybe there's a little bit of room for interpretation of what exactly is going on, because he didn't have the exact details, just that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 would be seeing an enhancement with new content. And so you might look at that and think, that is a definitive edition, as we've seen from the Xenoblade Chronicles series, but actually it is a Switch 2 edition. And sure, I understand how confusing that might be. My main point being, though, it wouldn't be the first time we've heard something from reputable leakers, and we do get something, but it's not exactly as they heard, because there's some room for interpretation for what exactly it is. Maybe some of these insiders hear about some new Pikmin stuff coming, but it's not a totally new game, and so they think, oh, it's gotta be a Switch 2 edition. But what if it's something more like Splatoon Raiders, a Pikmin spin-off? That could be pretty cool. There's a lot of potential with that. They can go in different directions with that. Maybe a more Louis-focused adventure, maybe another side campaign, maybe it's something focusing more on the nighttime gameplay we saw in Pikmin 4 that has a different gameplay style. There's various options here, and that would be very exciting. But let's say it's not that, or let's say it maybe is a Switch 2 edition, and there still could be something else, because I certainly think that's possible. Something I'll throw out there, and I'll be frank, I don't think this is likely anymore. Not for this year. I think it's very likely to be happening, and I've been talking about this for a while. I've been feeling, well, you know, if you just look at the history of next level game releases, they are due. They've been overdue. They were supposed to have something out last year. They didn't. So you would think, okay, well, with an extra year, maybe now they'll continue their pattern. They haven't. But I think they're hard at work at Luigi's Mansion 4. We've heard some development. We've heard there's supposed to be amiibos. These are rumors, but they're coming from Special Nick, so I think it's pretty reliable. It makes sense. Luigi's Mansion is a very successful Nintendo IP. It's early on to the generation. I think they got to be working on it. Maybe they're even holding back on it because they don't think they need it for this year, or maybe they want to save it for a big surprise announcement. If the Dustbloods, and this is one of the reasons why I really harped on the possibility of the Dustbloods being a December title as opposed to an October title, if the Dustbloods is a December title, or it's not even coming out this year, then something like Luigi's Mansion 4 could be one hell of a surprise announcement coming out 6 to 7 weeks before its actual release date, similar to what they did with Star Fox. They announce it, and it's coming out in October around Halloween, because Nintendo, interestingly, positioned Switch Sports Resort, a very casual-focused title, a week before Halloween. And Nintendo does like having their Halloween releases. Not every time, but it's happened a few times. So they could maybe pull something off like this. Now, another game that would also be fitting for the Halloween period, that might actually be more ready than a lot of us were thinking, is a Metroid title. And there's a couple possibilities here that we've detailed before. There have been rumors of a Super Metroid remake, but it would be pixel-based. This is the kind of thing that clearly doesn't have as big of a budget as a brand new Metroid title. Don't confuse this with Metroid Prime. That's a 3D Metroid game, it's a 2D Metroid game, but that still has 2.5D visuals. It's still fairly visually impressive, fairly ambitious. I would say it's a pretty big deal game. A Super Metroid remake, at least based off the rumor, wouldn't be that. It would be something based off sprites, which could still be really cool, but it wouldn't require as significant development resources or as large of a team or as much development time. And perhaps that's being positioned as a little bonus title for this year to hold us over until that next brand new, ambitious new 2D Metroid is ready. So some of you may have already heard about the leaked Metroid Ravenous. This is from official Brazilian legal government documentation. Nintendo of America submitted information for this game to get rated in Brazil, literally Metroid Ravenous, so it has been literally leaked. We know this exists. So, and based off that naming scheme, that's very clearly a follow-up to Metroid Dread, Metroid 6, a brand new 2.5D Metroid, likely having been in development by Mercury Steam, because they were so successful with Metroid Samus Returns, at least from a quality perspective, and with Metroid Dread from both a quality and sales perspective, the best-selling Metroid game to date back in 2021, it's certainly been enough time. They should be about ready for this next Metroid here. And so we have that leak. It's been rated, which tells us that it is close to completion. They could come out with it this year if they really wanted to. It's certainly possible. Now, it's not a guarantee. We see Nintendo rate games well ahead of time. They don't come out until the year afterwards, so maybe this is being saved for next year. But let me point out something else that came up recently, discovered by Dr.81, who is a master of sleuthing through all these different job sites and finding different developers who have finished certain projects. And he saw that there's an internal development tester at Mercury Steam who would most likely be making this new Metroid game. It's an unannounced project, and he noticed that when clicking on the different profiles on the different projects here, there would be some kind of video about the game. But in this case, for the unannounced project, the site includes a video about Metroid Dread, but it's an unannounced project, and they're done with it. At least they are. So, to me, that could be evidence that they may be very close to wrapping up Metroid Ravenous, and maybe Nintendo is going to pull something off crazy here again, like the Star Fox thing. You think you know what Nintendo has planned for that half of the year, and they're like, you know what? Nope, we got one more thing we're putting out there, and it's a big deal kind of thing. And what I find really interesting about this, or at least increasingly more interesting here, is that we've heard that with the Star Fox leak and the Ocarina of Time remake leak, Nintendo was very, very upset about that stuff. And considering how they handled Star Fox, they probably were planning it as a big surprise. And so we've also heard from Attack the Backlog, Nintendo's very upset about Metroid Ravenous getting leaked here. Now, I could see how some people within Nintendo's marketing would be very upset about Metroid Ravenous getting leaked, even if it's coming out next year. But maybe they were planning some sort of cool surprise announcement because the game is somehow going to sneak into this year, similar to what they did with Star Fox, and it getting leaked out like this maybe takes a little bit of wind out of the sails there. Personally, if the Nintendo does announce Metroid Ravenous to come out this year, I don't think it's going to impact how excited I'm going to be about this, not in the slightest, really. I think some people might. I understand why some people might be upset about it, but I just think it's interesting that we're hearing these things. I think there's this possibility, and I do think Nintendo's second half lineup from a quantity perspective in comparison to prior years is looking a little light, and based off how Nintendo has been handling their marketing and their surprise announcements, and what they theoretically have close to ready, if not already completely ready, they could do this. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.